sports. It stated more people watched Below the Deck Mediterranean than Unrivaled first game of season 2. Now, y'all see all these shows on TNT, that's 60,000, 50,000, 40,000, 40,000, bruh. 30,000, 20,000, bruh. Come on now.
Look at those numbers. Below Deck Mediterranean pulled more viewers than Unrivaled Season 2 premiere. We're talking about a reality show featuring yacht drama beating a professional basketball league that was supposed to revolutionize women's sports. And Commissioner Cathy Engelbert just spent months using Unrivaled as her primary talking point in CBA negotiations, so we need to address the obvious question: what happens when your entire negotiating strategy is built on viewership numbers that don't exist?
Don't lie. Well, I'm here to tell you, the numbers ain't lying, because Napheesa Collier is looking like Goofy of the Year. She got to be the goofiest person of the year. Her and Nika is looking like big-time Goofies of the Year, bruh. I just got to be honest, dog. At this point, Napheesa Collier is running out of time, and she need to be taken off the committee to be speaking to the owners and stuff. There's no way in hell she should be speaking to the owners at all at this point in time, man. It is downright distasteful and disgraceful with the buffoonery that she has been doing.
That's the reality check. Nobody in the league office wanted to see Unrivaled's first game of Season 2 couldn't crack 60,000 viewers on TNT. Meanwhile, random cable shows nobody's heard of are doubling and tripling those numbers in the same time slots, and this matters, because Engelbert specifically pointed to Unrivaled as proof that women's basketball could command premium media rights deals. She used it as leverage. She built her entire revenue projection model around the assumption that off-season basketball featuring WNBA stars would drive massive viewership. The WNBA Players Association wanted their CBA deal done by tonight. That deadline has come and gone with no agreement. And now we're looking at a very real possibility that the 2026 season doesn't start on time.
Here, WBPA Chiefs responds to Caitlin Clark's message of compressed and amid of CBA talks. It stated last month, Indiana Fever superstar Caitlin Clark spoke of the need of WNBA and Women's Basketball Players Association to find a way to play basketball in 2026. As it stands, the coming season is in some jeopardy. The league and the players union still have not agreed on a new collective bargaining agreement. Now it's set to.
Here's what makes this particularly problematic. The Players Union has been asking for significant revenue sharing as the centerpiece of the new collective bargaining agreement. They want a percentage of league revenue similar to what NBA players receive. That's not unreasonable on its face. But revenue sharing only works when there's actual revenue to share. And every negotiation the league has been in, Engelbert has been pointing to viewership growth as justification for why the WNBA deserves bigger media deals. Except now we have concrete evidence that viewership for women's basketball content outside the WNBA season is struggling to find an audience. Unrivaled was supposed to be the proof of concept. It was supposed to demonstrate that fans would show up year-round for elite women's basketball. Instead, it's becoming a case study in why the WNBA's valuation might be inflated.
Of negotiation, player unity, why they believe their stakes in other leagues are not conflicts of interest among those options. Now, however, Minnesota Lynx star Napheesa Collier and former WNBA MVP Anika Gumake think the league led by Commissioner Cathy Engelbert has more ground to be covered. Now, I do want to let y'all know this is something that has not been talked about. Is part of the negotiation is for Cathy to step down. Now, we haven't heard about Cathy leaving for a mighty long time. Could this be what's holding everything up? Now, we've seen other owners in the past pretty much say that, hey, we want Cathy gone too, but we don't know how many owners actually.
And this is where it gets complicated, because the players' union isn't backing down. Ninka, Ogumike, and the WNBPA leadership are saying they've been reasonable, they've been flexible, and the league isn't meeting them halfway. They're specifically stating that they're not asking for anything crazy. But here's the disconnect. What seems reasonable to ask for and what the league can actually afford to pay are two completely different conversations. The union wants to enter status quo, which means they're preparing for either a lockout or a strike. Under status quo, the WNBPA Executive Committee doesn't need player approval to implement work stoppage. They can make that call themselves. And we're now looking at a scenario where the league and the Players Association are so far apart that the entire 2026 season is in jeopardy. Think about the timeline here. If they don't reach an agreement by March, you can write off a May start date. Teams need training camp. Free agency has to happen. The draft needs to be scheduled and conducted. All of that takes time. If negotiations drag into February and March, you're looking at a season that starts in June or July at the earliest, maybe August. And the WNBA has USA basketball commitments in September for the World Cup qualifiers.
Do like the league needs to really pay attention and listen and take notice of exactly what we're coming to the table with time and time again, because we've been in the room trying to figure out what we can do to get both sides to be closer. We've been more than flexible, more than reasonable, and it's really sad and disappointing to see the league doesn't see players wins and league wins. Whatever the case may be, man, they is somehow not coming up with a solution to get us a 2026 season.
Now let's talk about what's not being discussed publicly, but is absolutely part of these negotiations. Multiple sources have indicated that part of the Players Association's demands include Cathy Engelbert stepping down as commissioner. We haven't heard much about this in mainstream coverage, but it's been floating around for months. Some owners have reportedly expressed similar concerns about Engelbert's leadership, particularly around how she's handled the Caitlin Clark situation and the league's relationship with its most marketable star. If Engelbert's job security is tied to these CBA negotiations, that explains why everything has stalled, because now you're not just negotiating salary structures and revenue-sharing percentages, you're negotiating who runs the league. And that's the kind of fundamental disagreement that doesn't get resolved quickly. The Players Union is pointing to Caitlin Clark's recent comments as validation of their position. Clark said this is the biggest moment the WNBA has ever seen, and it's important that they find a way to play next season. She's right about that. The league just came off its highest-rated season in 2 decades, driven almost entirely by Clark's rookie year and the attention she brought to the Indiana Fever. Losing an entire season right now would be catastrophic for momentum.
See, with the strike, I mean, we're going in the status quo from what I read earlier. That's basically stating that they don't need to vote with the players on going on strike. The WNBPA committee has that right to implement a strike or a lockout from the owners or the players. They don't need a vote. They don't do anything. The committee itself can take action in obviously what's possibly finna happen. Now, with that being said, we're about six hours away, you know what I'm saying, from finding out something. Now, whatever the case may be, is we still haven't had a lot.
But here's where the unrivaled ratings become relevant again. Because if the argument is that the WNBA deserves significantly higher revenue sharing based on growing fan interest, you need to prove that fan interest actually exists beyond Caitlin Clark and Unrivaled. Was supposed to be that proof. It features some of the league's biggest stars playing high-level basketball in a well-produced format with decent media coverage. If that can't draw viewers, what does that tell you about the actual market value of women's basketball outside of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon? This isn't about disrespecting the players or diminishing their talent. This is about cold business reality. Media companies pay for content based on what they think they can charge advertisers, and advertisers pay based on how many eyeballs they can reach. If Unrivaled is struggling to hit 60,000 viewers on TNT, that's going to impact how much networks are willing to pay for WNBA media rights in the next deal. And if the next media rights deal doesn't meet the league's projections, there's no revenue to share. So now we're at an impasse. The Players Association believes they deserve a significant increase in compensation and a revenue-sharing structure that reflects their value to the league. They're not wrong that the WNBA has seen unprecedented growth. Television ratings for the 2025 season were up dramatically compared to previous years. Attendance increased. Merchandise sales exploded. The league added a new expansion team in San Francisco that's generating massive interest. By every metric that matters, the WNBA is in a better position than it's ever been. But growth and profitability are not the same thing. The WNBA has been subsidized by the NBA for its entire existence. It has never turned a profit as a standalone entity. And while revenue has increased, so have expenses. Player salaries have gone up, travel costs have increased as the league expanded, marketing budgets have grown. The question isn't whether the WNBA is growing, the question is whether it's growing fast enough to support the kind of revenue-sharing structure the players are demanding, and this is where Engelbert's credibility becomes a real problem. Because she's been out there for months talking about how the league is positioned for explosive growth, how the media rights deals are going to be transformational, how women's basketball is finally getting the respect it deserves. She's been using Unrivaled as evidence. She's been pointing to international interest. She's been highlighting the Caitlin Clark effect as proof that the WNBA has arrived as a major professional sports property. But when Unrivaled can't outdraw cable reality shows, it undermines that entire narrative. It suggests that maybe the growth isn't as sustainable as Engelbert has been claiming. It raises questions about whether the WNBA's increased visibility is actually translating into a broader fan base, or if it's just a temporary spike driven by one generational talent. The Players' Union is right to fight for what they believe they're worth. Professional athletes have short careers, and they should maximize their earning potential while they can. But they're also operating in a business environment where the league they play in doesn't generate enough revenue to cover its own costs without NBA subsidies. That's not a sustainable model long-term, and it's not a model that supports aggressive revenue sharing in the short term. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The WNBA might be overvalued right now. The Caitlin Clark effect created a perception that the league had turned a corner and was ready to compete with other major professional sports properties. But one player, no matter how talented or marketable, can't carry an entire league forever. And if the underlying fundamentals don't support the valuation, eventually reality catches up. The Unrivaled ratings are that reality check. They're proof that even with elite talent, professional production, and decent media placement, women's basketball struggles to find a consistent audience outside of the WNBA season. That doesn't mean the league has no value. It doesn't mean the players aren't talented. It just means the market might not be as big as everyone hoped. And that puts both sides in an impossible position. The players can't accept a deal that doesn't reflect the growth they've helped create. The league can't offer a deal that commits them to revenue-sharing percentages they can't afford to pay. Something has to give. Either the players moderate their demands, or the owners open their wallets wider and accept losses for another few years while hoping the growth continues, or we don't have a season. Caitlin Clark's involvement in this conversation is interesting because she's the one player who could potentially play hardball. She's the reason ratings exploded, she's the reason attendance doubled in multiple markets. She's the reason the Indiana Fever went from being an afterthought to being the most watched team in the league. If she wanted to, she could use that leverage to force the league's hand. But she's been diplomatic, saying everyone needs to find a way to play next season because the fans deserve it. That's the right public stance, but it also reveals the fundamental problem. The fans do deserve to see the product on the floor, but deserving something and being able to afford it are different things. The WNBA deserves to be properly funded and supported. The players deserve to be fairly compensated, but if the revenue isn't there to support what everyone deserves, then somebody's expectations have to adjust. The status quo option that the Players' Union is preparing to invoke is essentially a nuclear option. It means work stoppage. It means no games until an agreement is reached, and unlike previous labor disputes in professional sports, the WNBA doesn't have the financial reserves to weather a prolonged stoppage. The league needs the revenue from ticket sales, media rights, and sponsorships. The players need their salaries. Neither side can afford to drag this out for months. So what happens next? Best case scenario, both sides recognize the stakes and find a compromise in the next few weeks. The season starts late, maybe in June, but it starts. Players get some form of revenue sharing, maybe not as much as they wanted, but enough to call it progress. Engelbert keeps her job but with a shorter leash from the owners, and everyone moves forward, hoping the Caitlin Clark effect continues to drive growth. Worst case scenario, negotiations collapse completely. The 2026 season is cancelled, players scatter to international leagues, or Unrivaled, or wherever they can find work. Sponsors pull out. Media partners renegotiate their deals or walk away entirely, and the WNBA loses all the momentum it built over the past year, potentially setting the league back a decade. The smart money is on some version of the best-case scenario because nobody really wants the worst case. But the fact that we're even discussing the possibility of a canceled season tells you how far apart these two sides actually are. And the unrivaled ratings collapse just made everything harder because it took away one of the league's best arguments for why they deserve more money. So here's the question you need to answer in the comments. Should the WNBA players accept a deal without significant revenue sharing to ensure the 2026 season happens, or should they hold firm on their demands even if it means risking a work stoppage? Because one way or another, this gets resolved in the next 60 days, and whatever decision gets made will determine the trajectory of women's professional basketball for the next decade. Let me know what you think, and if you want to stay updated on how this situation develops, hit that subscribe button because this story is far from over.